All right, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started for the sake of time. It is like 12:52. And so we've got a good hour to have a wonderful conversation with our panelists. We're going to do some actual group work and sharing out. And so we want to make sure that we have space and time. I am Jason Caldwell. I serve as the Director for Educator Recruitment Partnerships for the Department of Public Instruction. And my main job is really to help with teacher recruitment for the state of North Carolina. And so one of the avenues that we're looking at is, as you all have heard today, are those things around grow your own initiatives, how we can really scale that type of work to all of our counties across the state. How can we expand the reach so that we're reaching more students and even starting as early as possibly middle school and getting those pipelines developed? Because as we're looking at pipeline development, we know that is a sustainable model if we can get it up and get it going. So how can we help increase that? And with this opportunity for apprenticeships in the state of North Carolina, how can we turn that into a viable conversation as well? And we've got some best practices that are happening, and we've got some great examples and models that are shaping up. And so how can we utilize those opportunities to, again, scale and look at them across the state? So we've got a wonderful group with us today, a group of panelists, and we're going to have some questions for them. We're going to open it up for you all to have questions, and then we're going to sort of go into sort of a workout session. I was told this clicker works, but I don't think it is. Okay. Well, nope, I went too far. So let me introduce our panelists for you all today. We've got a good panel. We have got with us Kathryn Castelloes from Director of Apprenticeships, North Carolina. We've got Tammi Ward, the Interim Superintendent for Hertford County Schools. And we've got Dr. Hank Weddington, the Dean of the College of Education and Human Services at Lenoir-Rhyne University. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start off by teeing them up with a couple of questions to get going. And then we're going to open it up for you all. So please start thinking about some things that you want to ask. These are intimate sessions so that we can have those conversations. So think of questions, and hopefully we'll have enough time to go through all of them. But I want to start with Dr. Weddington. So we've talked about the pathway plan. You all have heard us talk about that this morning, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But there's a part of that that includes paid apprenticeship roles. So could you just tell us a little bit more about that position and why it's needed within the teacher pipeline?
Sure, be glad to. Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you. Thanks for being here. The way we're envisioning the apprenticeship is as a licensed position, not a classified position. So it's not to supplant the teacher assistants, it's to supplement. So it'll be a completely different role, one that we hope will be more engaged in classroom teaching under the guidance of a mentor. So it's not the teacher of record. The person has to be under a license for, in the model, 4 or better teacher in that classroom, but with a lot more teaching responsibilities than your typical teacher assistant role would have. It's also kind of designed to be a recruitment tool. In my world, thinking about ways to entice people to come into teacher education preparation programs is tough right now for all of us. But what we're proposing is that our student teachers, our interns, would be eligible to be one of these apprentice level positions. So they could have a licensed position during their student teaching semester during that 16 weeks. And I think the idea that they could get paid to do this student teaching experience would be huge in terms of both enticing people in and keeping them in their programs of study while they're in. Right now, the proposal is calling for $30,000 a year for these particular positions as an apprentice. So basically about half a year they would be in. So it'd be maybe a $15,000 stipend for those students to help them pay their life costs as they do a full-time job as an intern. It's a 1-year contract. It's the way that we've got it written up right now. You can keep it up to 3 years, but it has to be renewed each year by the school. And by the end of that 3rd year, you would have to have met the qualifications for that license 1, which is basically a bachelor's degree and some competencies that you would have gained during that apprenticeship. To be an apprentice, though, you don't need your bachelor's degree. You can come in with an associate's degree. We're looking hopefully towards, an associate's in one of the teacher ed programs, but it could be any kind of associate's degree, or it could be 60 hours towards a bachelor's degree. So if you're halfway through a bachelor's degree program, that'll put you pretty much at the same level somebody with an AA coming into a university program would have, so that you could step into one of those positions and maybe have that as your job as you work your way through your educator preparation program. The idea being that this would create that pipeline to our EPPs and be able to get them out into that level 3 license so that they can finally get into the level 4 license as a career teacher. I think that's the other piece that we put in here is that we find it real essential that there has to be teacher support systems in place. So unless we're going to have good mentoring for these folks to be able to make their way through and support, it's probably not going to be very successful. So ensuring that there's support from the school districts, from the state level there, and when they affiliate with the EPP, that the EPP is also engaging in that support for these early career teachers and making sure that they get through that pipeline. I've got some other people here on the committee, so always feel free to jump in if you've got other things to add, but I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. And I will share this. I know, and I don't think we've branded it as official sort of apprenticeship model through DPI, but I do know that we did receive funding for EC teachers in the hopes of being able to provide a stipend for EC teachers who are in their student teaching phase. And that was just sent out to our EPP partners within the last week or so. So I think there's some developing models that are looking at how we can create more opportunities around that apprenticeship. And so this will be certainly a test case to see how it could transition into that. But as we talk about, yes, I see a question.
Oh, no. I was just going to add to that. We're in partner with a lab school that I think was mentioned earlier today. And with the lab school, they have the apprenticeship with the stipend, but they also have the pre-apprenticeship for our juniors with the stipend. And that's what was appealing to our juniors. Can I go? Can I go? And so once they finish that, then they could go to the apprenticeship position. And that was one of our recruitment tools, trying to maintain our students so they don't transfer out to other majors. But I like the pre-apprentice as well as the apprenticeship.
Sure, and technically, if they had finished their freshman and sophomore years, if they were a junior, they would be eligible for an apprenticeship if they wanted to take it and it was available in the school system at that time. Now that means EPPs might have to do some work on the back end to make sure you're offering classes at a time when they can actually get them, or online classes.
Could I add to that I think would be pertinent for everyone to make sure that you realize that, again, I'm Kathryn with Community College System Office and I'm Director of Apprenticeship. I also represent the U.S. Department of Labor because we're recognized as the state apprenticeship agency in North Carolina. But in 2016, legislation was passed that if a high school student is registered either as a pre-apprentice or as an apprentice before they graduate from high school and go on to continue working with that employer as an apprentice, their tuition is waived at the community college system. So that helps them as far as beginning that career with the education to get that associate's degree and go on after that for their bachelor's.
So could you share some more about that? Yes.
Dr. Caldwell, we're joined by 12 online folks as well. So they're putting their questions into the chat for me. Awesome. So the question.
Welcome to our online audience.
Yeah, we've got to.
Kathryn, did you mind sharing some more just about apprenticeships and
right.
The model around that, and what we could learn from sort of the apprenticeship model?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was taking notes while the speakers early this morning, and their phrases and the things that they're saying, such as grow your own, recruitment, retention, talking about the data from the state of Tennessee. And actually Tennessee is the first state to have a registered apprenticeship program. So I'm like, oh, well, we can, James and I were talking, we can beat them. But there's a lot to that. Apprenticeship is for both public and private entities, employers of all sorts, and for thousands of different occupations. And it is so at the forefront of training across the country right now. Apprenticeships are a huge hot topic. Even this week, Dr. Jill Biden had an event for where she was talking about apprenticeships and specifically teacher apprenticeships. So there's lots of support. We've even received a grant to help funding for teachers, to help with training expenses, to help working with universities and some expenses. It's not a lot of money, but there's some funding there. And even on the state level, from the North Carolina legislature, for the rural counties, there's $12 million for apprenticeships. So there's lots of interest around apprenticeship because, well, apprenticeship's been in North Carolina since 1939. It's been around, but it's being seen now as not only an occupation that's traditionally been known for construction trades. This is something that can be used across the board. We have nursing, we have biotech occupations, we've got nuclear power engineers, we've got a wide variety, but now is a prime opportunity to tap into funding that's specifically available for this occupation.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I have a question for Hank. And Hank, you and I have had a lot of conversations about people maybe not even going into ed prep because they look forward and they see, how am I going to do that when I have to quit my part-time job? So how do you see apprenticeships helping ed prep programs attract students, first of all, or keep them if they haven't thought through, hey, my senior year, I'm going to have to quit my job?
Yeah. I mean, I think the paid apprenticeship takes care of that, right? If we're telling them at the beginning, you're going to get paid for doing that work, then you don't need another job at that point. That's what's going to help us. And I think it's going to be enticing at the front end, especially to talk to parents and say, you're going to do an internship at the end of all of this that's actually going to pay off for you, have some payment on it, maybe even by your junior year, if you were to get one of those positions. So I think it's a huge benefit to the EPPs, and I think it'll drive more towards the EPPs. And of course, I'm going to be the cheerleader for them. The track record shows really clearly that people who come through the traditional EPPs are more effective in the classroom than those who come through some of the alternative routes, even though we offer some alternative routes and residency programs as well. So the hope would be that we would get more students coming through either the community college system into our programs or straight into our programs to prepare them for the job and to do it in the best way possible. And that I believe that having, a $15,000 stipend at the end as your goal out there that you're going to get when you finish your teacher prep program and the internship, I think that's a huge incentive for folks to go into the field, especially if they're compensated when they get their full license at that new level that we're talking about right now. I think it's going to make a huge difference for sure.
And I think when we have that conversation around market and the professional development side or the professionalism of teaching, that component of a paid sort of internship apprenticeship is generally foreign in teaching. As a former classroom teacher, when I went through, there was no conversation around you're getting paid to do your student teaching. I had to quit my job actually because I could not. I was doing my student teaching in Forsyth County. I was in school at UNCG. I had to commute from Greensboro to Winston. There was no way I could work. There was no conversation around getting paid for that. But if there is a conversation, I do think that it will help to revitalize and rebrand sort of the role of teaching in the professional side of it, because I think too many of our students don't see the professional nature of it as they do their Deloitte's and corporate America internship opportunities. They don't see that necessarily in teaching. So having that opportunity and it also helps us to look at different sort of paraprofessional opportunities and how we're really working with those employees within our buildings who might not be licensed, but have a desire to go into it. And I know that's something that Hertford County has been looking at with your TAs to teachers and looking at registered apprenticeship models. Tammi, could you talk to us a little bit about what you all are doing there?
Well, first of all, for those of you that are familiar with the Northeast, you know, for us, there is a true teacher retention and grow our own need. We come from a district where we experience above 20% turnover rate on a regular basis. And each year when we hire, we're lucky. This year we had 2 candidates from the ones that we hired that had been through an official EPP program. So we are truly in a model where we have to encourage, educate, and train our classroom teachers. So in 2018-19, we applied for the Advanced Teacher Roles Grant and were granted that. And in that original application, we had a phase 3 that we had identified that we wanted to look at building what we called a paraprofessional residency, is what we called it in the grant. So this apprenticeship is just very timely for us. We have had 7 teacher assistants who have become teachers in Hertford County Public Schools. And I think we all know that a lot of that's come just only from the encouragement of their administrator, you know, the compassion and the nurturing that we can provide them, because they've had to go to school on top of working a full school day. So I think that's one of the things that the apprentice program can do for us. It was mentioned that these apprentice programs need to have mentoring teachers that are good classroom teachers. So we have in our, you're going to hear me call it Opportunity Culture, that's our advanced teacher role program. Within Opportunity Culture, we have built different classroom teacher leaders. We don't have any, none of our instructional coaches are full-time instructional coaches. They're all content related teachers who then get a portion of their day to be what we call a multi-classroom teacher leader. We also developed a role that's called a Reach Associate, and these are the paraprofessional roles that work with an MCL, a multi-classroom teacher leader, to provide classroom instruction, co-planning, so that that multi-classroom teacher leader can leave the classroom and do co-teaching and coaching while the Reach Associate remains in the classroom with the students. So this is an excellent placement for us to build that internal capacity for someone who wants to go on and get their teaching degree and become a classroom teacher while they're under a strong teacher leader at that particular time. So I think the internship, the apprenticeship can add a lot to our program that we already have in place. But what's also more exciting is the pre-apprentice that we see in place to get our students wanting to come back to Hertford County and to use our local community college, the 2+2 program, our partners that we have in our university level to work with us, because we have a great opportunity to have student teachers, but they don't stay with us. They go back home. So hopefully this apprentice program can add where we can keep our own internal candidates and have them remain with us and become teachers, because those are our most successful teachers, are the ones that are homegrown and have commitment to our community.
And I think another part of this conversation, we probably won't get into much today, is sort of that our articulation agreements, the course development, how that interplays. My background is working with articulation agreements. I came from Western Governors, where I was over the community college strategic partnership development, and I lived in articulation agreements and career pathway development. So I love that kind of stuff. Like, I know it's a little trippy that people like to look at how courses align, but it's important as a faculty member at an institution who has had students transfer in, and I look at their transcript and courses aren't on there. And there's like, I took this course. Well, you might have, but then transfer in. So then you have to take this, and that can set students back. So how do we make sure that we're aligning curriculum pathways and all that stuff so that it benefits the student. I know we've got some questions online, Jessica. So we'll shift over to some general Q&A.
Absolutely. Thank you. Coming, and I'm getting a feedback loop in my ear, so I'm just going to take this out. Coming from Stephanie, is the EPP having to make adjustments in programming to allow candidates to be available to work full-time as an apprentice?
Would they have to?
Or are you doing that?
Well, it's not happening yet, but if that were to happen and somebody were to take one during their junior year, we may have to make courses available at different times to make sure that we would account for them being in a job. During the actual internship and student teaching, we're already doing it. They're doing the job right now. They're out there. They've been working hard for decades now without any pay. So they would just get paid would be the difference there. Yeah.
There was also a reference to a lab school earlier. They wanted to know the name of the lab school that was being referenced.
Yes, it was Elizabeth Duncan Coombs Elementary Lab School, and that is in Rowan County. And as the earlier presenter said, there are 9 across the state, I do believe. And this is just the initial phase to see how that's working. And going back to the previous question, for us, since we do have students in the lab school, we do make arrangements for them. If the class is at a certain time during the day, of course, we know they can't attend that class, but the instructors know to make arrangements, and they will have a one-on-one with them or have a Zoom meeting with them. But yes, we do make arrangements for the student.
That's great. Thank you. And I had just had one final comment. This is from Christina. She said, I would like to see the model include a paid apprenticeship for anyone who wants to do a traditional preparation route in addition to the quote apprentice license. For example, Dr. Graham mentioned the teacher residency grants that several EPPs currently have. Apprenticeship funding could make these residency models become sustainable. Thank you.
Are there any other general? Yes.
Just a comment, and just generally, since part of our convening this morning was about the Pathways to Excellence model, part of that model that I'm so excited about is this very thing, is the idea of paid student teaching, paid internships. It seems to me to be the one piece of the model that we ought to be able to agree on immediately, is that young people that are making their way through an EPP program who get to their student teaching need some way to put food on their table, to pay their rent, to pay their cell phone bill, to put gas in their tank. And as a practicing teacher who had student teachers, I saw folks that would leave our school at 4 o'clock and then they would go work at Olive Garden or Walmart until 10 o'clock, and then come back the next day. And you can only do that so long before the quality of your student teaching experience gets diminished, because we haven't acknowledged that you're really doing 2 jobs instead of 1. So I just wanted to acknowledge that I think that one of the strengths of this Pathways to Excellence model is the fact that it has a paid internship or paid apprenticeship built into it. The question I did have for the panelists about apprenticeships that you guys are forming is, have you guys given consideration, or does your design include a sort of a promissory agreement for folks that do receive apprenticeship funding, so that they would come back and, like, there is a connection between the investment you're making in them while they're going through the apprenticeships and then their potential employment, in your local schools or in your local entities, almost like a promissory agreement, to make sure that you get a return on investment.
I can speak to that just a little bit, and the answer is yes, we do want to include that in our model. Do we have it formalized yet? No, and a part of that is because if we do ours within the advanced teaching role, one of our commitments is that we will provide these opportunities within our budget. So if we're providing the budget for those advanced teacher roles for this, then we want to make sure that that money that we're invested in, we get to benefit from that investment. Same way with the apprenticeship. If they come under the apprenticeship program, as I mentioned, we have a lot of student teachers. We're so fortunate to be connected with a university, but we don't end up getting those teachers. So I'm not sure how that will work between the university and ourselves, but if we have the model within, we are looking at what those options are that we can provide that agreement that at least for a certain amount of time, you will remain with us as we help prepare you for your career also.
And I do know with the EC stipend that they just released for student teachers, there is a note in there that asks the person to stay. They have to commit to staying in North Carolina after they complete it. So, and I think it's for up to 3 years after they receive the funding.
The Pathways doesn't have any promissory in it. I will say though, it would be awesome if we could have a vast expansion of the Teaching Fellows program right now. If we had that on the front end and then the stipend on the back end, we'd be turning them away instead of trying to find them. It would be an amazing thing. I always, there are so many teaching fellows that are in these kinds of rooms making decisions now. I was one, yeah, raise your hand. Yeah, it's amazing. That program created most of the leaders in North Carolina right now in education, and we just disbanded it. I know it's back in a different kind of format now, but if we expanded that again, brought those folks in and then paid them stipends, it would be incredible. So both ends would be nice.
Jason, if you don't mind, I would just like to comment that, over in Edgecombe, our county manager was a teaching fellow. Our community college president was a teaching fellow. One of the rationales for disbanding the teaching fellows was that so many people did leave the profession. But they didn't leave the profession, they continued in public service. And I think it's really
Grew
powerful.
in their profession.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I want my community college president to understand the teaching profession, right? So I think that's really powerful that, you made that comment. I do also, though, want to comment on demographic shifts in North Carolina, because in North Carolina, we have about 15 counties that are growing in population and the other 85 are shrinking in population. And so when we have a teaching fellows program in its current entity that draws students from the east and draws them from the west, and it draws them to urban counties like, Chapel Hill, NC State, Meredith, Elon, the Charlotte, for example, these are like the first 5 teaching fellows entities. And then coming out of those EPPs, they do their student teaching or their apprenticeships in that area. They get their first job opportunity in those areas. The local supplement in those areas is higher than it is in their rural counties. Then the program in its current entity, even with the addition of the 3 HBCUs, siphons talent from tier 1 or eastern or western counties. And so, to your point, Hank, about expanding the teaching fellows in the entity of the teaching fellows that you and I went to, it was at every university, right? Which allowed us to serve regional areas as opposed to a statewide promissory agreement, right?
Yeah, exactly.
With that, you wouldn't have to have a promissory agreement.
Right.
But we're also working with all the universities to help establish this pipeline of recruitment. And I'd love to get more involved with teaching fellows with this, to have it as an opportunity for everyone that we work with throughout the state.
So we're going to slightly